and I made him watch. Hello and welcome to And I Made Him Watch, where I forced my husband to watch weird movies and then we discuss how weird things really got. I'm your host, Dani Page, and here with me, forever and always, my spouse, partner, husband, and filmmaker, my lovely co-host, Troy Allen. How are you?
I'm doing good, Dani. How are you?
I'm good.
Great.
Belly full of pancakes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I made you watch Daughters of Darkness from 1971. Now, I've watched it before, like a year and a half ago. And when I was telling friends about it, this is word for word what I told them. So this bombshell of a European woman marries this 40-looking 1960s something British man who seems to be rich as fuck, and they have some connection to royalty. Anyway, they suddenly got married, but there's this weird tension between them because he doesn't want to tell his mother, and they're already married, and it's kind of weird. So anyway, these two lesbians show up who happen to be vampires. The older vampire is like this platinum blonde and is sad, just over dramatically mysterious. Her companion is this beautiful French lady, and when I say French, I mean page boy haircut, sad eyes type of French. The older vampire falls for the European woman, and things just get really weird. And I told them if they liked 70 B movies, this would be good. And at the time, I gave it a 4.5 out of 10. My opinion might have changed after watching it the second time and after doing more research.
I think that definitely fits the bill. The main guy, Stefan, he kind of looks like a young Bill Paxton to me.
With Tom Cruise.
Yeah, maybe mixed with some Tom Cruise. As far as the vampires being lesbians, I can see that for sure. I mean, to be honest, they're like seriously giving off some lesbian vibes. And with the Countess being who she is, I can completely understand why.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then with Ilona, yeah, she's definitely like the epitome of 1970s, like French new wave. So kind of like an artsy feel to her.
Yeah. So, before I get into all the details about the director and some of the cast, just a forewarning, I'm going to pronounce some things wrong, and I apologize ahead of time. The film was co-written and directed by Harry Kumel, a Belgian filmmaker. He has had a pretty impressive portfolio, having directed, written, and acted in several films. From what I found, he is still involved in the industry now as a teacher, teaching cinema at several film institutes. While researching this movie, I found a few more of Kumel's movies pretty interesting, and we may watch a few more of his in the future. The bombshell European woman, as I described her before, Valerie, is portrayed by Danielle Ouimet. I probably did not pronounce her last name right. She's not European, in fact, but a Canadian actor born in Montreal. She has been active in the film community since 1969 for movies, television series, and some talk shows. In 1966, she was awarded Miss Providence of Quebec. Her most recent role is Alfreda Godin in the 2023 drama comedy show Bon Matin Chuck, or Good Morning Chuck, on Crave, about a morning show host who is forced into rehab after a public scandal. I tried really hard to find an episode or a short of the show to watch, but had no luck. I did find a little info video on YouTube, and it actually looks really funny, and the stills I saw are very provoking. The French lady, who actually isn't French, Ilona, is played by German actress Andrea Rowe, who is as stunning as she is talented and has been involved in the film industry since 1968. From my research, she has been in over 40 productions and has even produced 4 videos of her own, the latest in 2011. In 2022, she won the German Independence Honorary Award at the Oldenburg Film Festival. And the 40-something 1960s British guy I mentioned, Stefan, is actually played by an American actor, John Carlin. Carlin had an intense and active career as an actor, credited with over 100 roles. I think it was like 140. He is best known for his roles in Cagney and Lacey, a 1980s TV drama revolving around two female cops, and then also in Dark Shadows, the 1960s Gothic soap opera, where he plays con artist Willie Loomis. He also revised his role in the Dark Shadows movie, House of Dark Shadows. By the way, I'm adding House of Dark Shadows on my watch list. He won a Primetime Emmy in 1986 for his role in Cagney and Lacey, the Best Supporting Actor in 1986 and in 1987 from the Viewers of Quality Television Awards. The seductive and dramatic, mysterious Countess Bathory. Is that how they pronounce it? How do they pronounce it in the movie?
It's pronounced Bathory.
Bathory, not Bathory, not Battery.
Bathory.
Bathory. It's played by none other than the art house cinema queen Delphine Seyrig. The French actress began her career on stage in the 1950s and then had small roles in the 1954 Sherlock Holmes TV series. Her first feature film was Alan Rene's Last Year in Marienbad in 1961. It's a movie about it's a dreamy and sensual story about a love triangle between a man and a woman who possibly had a love affair the year before, and then another man who could possibly be the woman's husband. I'm being very vague here on purpose because I only watched the trailer and read the Wikipedia article. But it appears to be quite an impressive, interesting movie, and it looks extremely beautiful. Her most accomplished role is considered to be that of the single mother in Jeanne Dieleman, 23 Commerce Way, 1080 Brussels, from 1975. The film depicts the life of Jeanne over the course of 3 days, where she takes care of her household and earns money through sex work. Her routine slowly starts to unravel as the days progress. Throughout Delphine's impressive career, she used her status to promote women's rights. She directed several films about the subject, one being the 1977 film, and excuse me because I don't speak French, Sois belle et têteuse, or in English, Be Pretty and Shut Up, where Shirley MacLaine, Maria Schneider, and Jane Fonda discussed the levels of sexism they had to deal with within the film industry. In 1963, she won Best Actress at the Venice Film Festival. Then in 1970, she won Best Supporting Actress at the NSFC Awards. And then in 1990, she won Best Actress at Seven Dior Night. So, The Daughters of Darkness had a budget of $750,000, which is about $5,642,000 now in 2024. It's not a budget just to be thrown around, in my opinion. With that budget, they had some very impressive filming locations. The external shooting was done at the Royal Galleries of Ostend. It's a neoclassical arcade on the beach of Ostend, Belgium. It began constructions on the order of King Leopold II in 1902 and then complete construction in 1906. The interior shots were done at the famous Hotel Astoria in Brussels. The 5-star luxury hotel was built in 1909. It has this Louis XVI facade and a majestic interior, which we saw in Daughters of Darkness. The hotel closed in 2007, then was bought by Global Hotels and Resorts. In 2010, the restoration project began and had planned to reopen late last year in 2023, but from what I've researched, it's failed to do so. Other exterior shots include the tropical gardens at Maasai, located on the grounds of the Bushout. How do you think it's?
I think it's pronounced Bushout.
Bushout?
Yeah.
Castle north of Brussels. Established in 1840, it's one of the largest botanical gardens with 92 acres and around 18,000 plants. So, Daughters of Darkness is described as an erotic horror film with a leaning towards a sapphic theme. Do you know what sapphic means?
I have no clue what sapphic means.
Okay, so for you and for our listeners who might not be familiar with the term sapphic, it is linked to the ancient Greek poet Sappho. Sappho, renowned for her lyrical and emotional poetry, notably composed works that depicted romantic and erotic relationship between women. The term sapphic has evolved to become a descriptor commonly used to characterize romantic connections between women, encapsulating the spirit of Sappho's evocative verses that celebrate love and passion within the context of female relationships. Although the movie begins following this hetero couple, Stefan, and Valerie, it is the Countess Elizabeth Bathory and Ilona that the spotlight shines on, and then Elizabeth's seduction of Valerie. The movie begins with a blood red fade-in for our opening credits. We'll see a lot of red themes throughout this movie. We are introduced to the newlyweds, Stefan and Valerie, who are being intimate. The intimacy is a bit off here. There's some violence in the action, and it's as if Stefan is trying to devour Valerie, seeming very desperate.
Yeah, I feel like it gives us some insight into their power dynamic between Stefan and Valerie, and it's almost a bit of foreshadowing if you think about it.
Yes. There's this strange exchange after their intimacy of teasing between the two about how they don't really love each other, but that means they're perfect for each other. We see a lot of this between these two. A constant tease, even a disregard by Stefan towards Valerie's feelings, wants, and needs. How do you feel about those opening scenes, though?
I thought the opening was great in terms of, establishing the setting, from the train blaring its horn as it enters the frame, and we have that ominous glow from the moonlight. It, really spurs the interest. And then when we first meet Valerie and Stefan, that same glow of moonlight is shrouding them. So that's, it's giving us some motivated light in that scene.
Yeah. We see even more issues and cracks within the relationship as the issue of announcing their marriage to Stefan's mother is brought up. Stefan promises to call when they reach their hotel, but their trip is being delayed due to a train going off the rails.
Yeah, this whole movie went off the rails.
Once they reach the hotel, Valerie brings up the issue yet again, and Stefan seems to agree to make the call. However, he discreetly instructs the bellhop to convey that there is no reply. When they finally settle into their room, the bellhop calls, relaying the message as Stefan has directed. This reveals another aspect of Stefan's character, showing his ongoing efforts to keep himself and his wife hidden from his mother. It's worthy noting that starting a marriage with deception like this isn't exactly the ideal way to begin a lifetime journey together.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's not the way you want to go about it, for sure. The shots when they first enter the hotel are really well thought out. It feels like all of the lighting is motivated and fits the aesthetic. Mm-hmm. I really love that insert shot of the note that Stefan hands to Pierre, the concierge, and the shot immediately following that. The way that Stefan is looking up at Pierre kind of reminds me of that famous Kubrick stare. Just imagine Jack Torrance looking up at Wendy on the stairs in the Overlook Hotel. I really loved it.
Oh yeah, there are some sinister vibes as they're exchanging the note. And Pierre looks very confused and almost has like this innocence to him.
Yeah. And then there's a shot soon after where the camera is looking out over the balcony railing, and then it kind of does this slow zoom on the mail ship. And when I first watched it, I didn't really catch the importance of it, but now I'm realizing that it was the mail ship they were supposed to catch to England. And then, so I was more focused on the shaky zoom because it kind of made the camera movement stand out to me.
Yeah. So the shots of the mail ship stand out to me because it's like watching missed opportunities. I believe there are several shots, which in fact I know there's several spots of the same mail ship throughout their stay, which is a missed opportunity to leave and move away from the situation they found themselves in.
Yeah, I can see that. It does feel like they missed their opportunity.
Mm. It's also the off season for the area, so Stefan and Valerie are the only ones in the hotel. And we see how isolated and reserved they are from the world here. The hotel seems to become their own personal quote-unquote paradise, but things don't stay that way as the issue continues over Stefan's mother comes up again, and the gaslighting continues. Stefan even claims that his mother hates Valerie already, even without knowing she exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the wide shots in the dining room are very well done. They're mostly wide two shots, which is where the frame encompasses two people, with a few over-the-shoulder shots mixed in during the dialogue, but it ties that scene together so well.
Yeah. It's very vacant and cold when they're just sitting together alone in this huge dining room. And then there's this part where Stefan tries to feed Valerie, and she's just so upset over him not wanting to talk to his mother. And then it goes to this like weird thing where he points at her.
Yeah, it's almost like he reached out to like touch her face or something like that. Mm-hmm. And there was here, try the fish is delicious, you know. It's kind of weird.
Cuts him off.
Yeah.
He wants none of it.
So in the next scene, we see a red car approaching, which I have to point out, there's 3 shots of this car approaching, which are more or less the same shot, but with different angles. And maybe it was a creative decision by the director and editor, or maybe it was just something that fell through the cracks of the editing room floor. It just felt jarring to me. I don't know. What were your thoughts on it?
It really bothered you, didn't it?
It did. Yeah.
It did. I don't know. I don't really notice it as much as you did until you pointed it out. Mm-hmm. I think probably it was just to take up time, possibly, or maybe it's supposed to give a sense of a longer journey, or the arrival was actually longer than it was.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, either way, the movie is how it is. You know, there's no going back.
So next we have the arrival of Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Bathory? I'd said it wrong. Bathory. And her quote-unquote secretary, Ilona. Every time I see Delphine Seyrig get out of this car, she just steals my heart. She's so devastatingly beautiful and powerful, even before you see her whole face.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of the intent of the cinematographer here. So Edward van der Enden, the director of photography on the film, he was definitely no slouch on this production. In that shot, he's using the light to conceal her face, or the absence of light, I should say. You know, just trying to hold on to that mystery. And most horror films that you see will do that, trying to conceal the big bad until the last possible moment. It's kind of like once you see the monster, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore, you know?
And the moment doesn't last long, because in a swift transition, the tranquility of the newlyweds is disrupted. The newcomers step into the hotel, and immediately the spotlight shifts to the entrance of the Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Picture her clad in a lavish ensemble of luxury leather and fur, in a sea of black enveloping her. Director Kumail paints her character as a demagogue, wielding authority over emotions to assert control, skillfully tapping into the fears of those around her. Camille's narrative prowess delves deeper, using the Countess's wardrobe as a visual metaphor. The choice of colors, unfortunately reminiscent of Nazis, create a subtle yet powerful link. It symbolizes the Countess' manipulation techniques, much like the Nazis used fear to control. A parallel drawn not just in her interactions with others, but also in how she presents herself. The black attire becomes a visual echo of the fear she installs, both in others and as a tool to empower for herself.
Now, let's talk about how the cinematography dives into a bit of history with those Nazi-associated colors. So picture this. The camera zooms in or pans over these details, and maybe in a close-up or a medium shot. It's like a visual Easter egg hunt, letting the audience catch that historical nod without spelling it out. So it's the kind of subtlety that sparks those aha moments, you know? Mm-hmm. But here's the kicker. The cinematography here isn't just about snapping pictures. It's like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of visuals that tug at your heartstrings. Kumail's got this magic touch with framing and lighting and how the camera moves through the scene. It's not just about what you see, it's about what you feel and the stories between the frames. So, in a nutshell, the cinematography isn't just capturing moments, it's telling a story in its own language. It's like Kumail's painting with light, shadows, and movement, turning a scene into a visual melody that sticks with you. It's the kind of movie magic that makes you go, whoa, did you catch that? It's more than just a scene, it's an experience.
Yes. So there's an exchange between the Countess and Pierre as she tries to check into the hotel, where Pierre claims that she had stayed here once before. I think he says something along 40 years or so. Mm-hmm. And it couldn't be possible because the Countess is so young. And I just feel bad for poor, confused Pierre. He's just trying to earn a living and take care of the hotel.
Yeah. I mean, that exchange is so powerful. I think it gives the viewer the first sense of who Countess Elizabeth Bathory is. And then we get this beautiful long shot through the glass-windowed French doors, you know, and Stefan and Valerie are perfectly framed in that middle door. Mm-hmm. And then Ilona walks in and we're greeted with an opposing long shot of Ilona and the Countess staring at Stefan and Valerie. So it kind of gives you the chills.
Yes, there's an air of drama between the couples as they exchange these faraway looks. It's almost like seeing two ends of a tunnel and all the space in between them. Their destiny seem to be tied together as if they're meant to be connected. The intense gazes suggest that their paths are inevitably linked, that the events that are about to unfold are unavoidable. It's also almost like if you've lived alone on this planet all your life and then suddenly you find another human. Yeah. Like it's just this fascination.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was the intention. I really do. It's almost like they were seeing a reflection of themselves, almost.
Stefan decides to continue their stay, and Valerie asks about the woman who just tried to check in. Pierre informs him that it's a Countess Elizabeth Bathory. And Stefan looks a little shocked and uneasy about this.
Yeah, so I don't know if you noticed, but during this exchange, the score turns sort of eerie and ominous, which does a great job in evoking that sort of fight or flight response. And I think that the original exchange between Pierre and the Countess, between that and the original exchange, we have a pretty good understanding of what the Countess is about.
Mm-hmm. And that score, that eeriness, actually transitions into the next scene. And now we get to see an intimate exchange between Elizabeth and Ilona and the control Elizabeth has over her companion. In this scene, Elizabeth is kind of lounging like this large house cat and is decked out in this opulent feather-rimmed house robe, seeming to be in bliss. She watches Ilona, who spies out the window to Stefan and Valerie, walking along the beach. She watches the couple with a sense of want and longing. And there's already an issue of Ilona's jealousy over Valerie, as Elizabeth will not stop talking about her. When Elizabeth confronts Ilona's jealousy, she seems to just shrug off Ilona's emotions, and then Ilona mentions that she wants to die, and the Countess continues to just ignore it further.
Yeah, and let's not forget to mention that odd attraction that Ilona had to the phallic-shaped handle. I mean, she was really into that thing. But other than that, I really like the shots of Ilona in the window and that extreme long shot of Stefan and Valerie on the beach. With Ilona, her face being bathed in that moonlight, it just looked amazing.
Yeah, it does seem like she has a fascination with that handle. Yeah. This is our first glance at the complex relationship that they share and the similarity to the relationship of the other couple has. We have this dominant and disregarding Elizabeth that is like Stefan's own personality. Then we have the comparison of Ilona and Valerie, who are the more subdued personalities of each relationship. The next morning, Stefan and Valerie discover the murders happening in nearby Bruges. 3 young women have been murdered, their throats cut and drained of blood. By this point, we start to see the repetitive theme of red. Ilona's red scarf, the red robe Stefan wears in the hotel room. The color is associated with many things within the film, like passion and sensuality. Like when Stefan is wearing this robe in the bed with Valerie. Also in this scene, they're eating in bed, and all I can really focus on is the idea of crumbs in the bed because they're eating bread. And it just gives me the ick. While having breakfast in bed, Stefan suddenly tosses the tray onto the floor and starts to kiss Valerie. It's very sudden, and Valerie screams, and it's very jarring. All while Stefan is wearing this red robe. I just feel like kind of bad for the housekeepers that have to clean up the waste of food and the broken things. And then it's decided by Stefan that they should go to Bruges.
Yeah, it was definitely a dick move on Stefan's part to do that.
Yes.
He shouldn't have done that. But so the next scene shows Stefan and Valerie arriving in Bruges, and it starts with these fantastic shots of them in the boat taxi. Mm-hmm. And as we're tracking with the boat, we come across a man riding his bike across the bridge. Now, keep that man in mind because he'll be important later. But in the next shot, we hear an ambulance, and this ambulance keeps pace with the boat. And as the ambulance turns down the street towards the gaggle of people, the boat arrives at the dock on the same street. So it's kind of like Stefan and Valerie were meant to be there.
Yeah.
So
we also continue with the red theme here as well. The inside of the boat is painted red, and Stefan, I don't know why I want to say Stefan. Stefan is wearing a red leather jacket. During the scene, the symbolized leans towards passion and sensuality again, as the couple are lounging and embracing each other on the boat. It's a very romantic moment, but the symbolism changes rather quickly as this scene progresses. People are flocking around the ambulance that we saw, doing what most people in small towns do, being nosy. This is where we meet the retired detective, who isn't given a name and is credited as retired policeman, played by George's Jammin. He is dressed in neutral colors with a white scarf, and we see more use of Kamel's color palette here. I've also noticed by this point that Valerie is almost always dressed in neutral tones or in white. As they exchange words, and the retired policeman seems a bit shocked and curious that Stefan is a tourist, The body is brought out, and it's shrouded in this red blanket that conceals all of her body except one of her arms, which is stark white. All the people start to follow the body, crowding it and trying to get a better look, and Stefan seems to be infatuated with this dead body, watching it so intently and obsessively that when Valerie tries to pull him away, he knocks her down and away from him, and she falls against the ambulance. And it's another display and reminder of his control over Valerie. And there are some really eerie and stressful shots right here.
Yeah, totally there are. I loved it. These shots do such a great job of putting the viewer in the mix. First, we see the retired policeman walk up behind Stefan, and after getting through their slight language barrier, he begins explaining to Stefan the murders that have been taking place. So we see the policeman standing over Stefan's shoulder, and the camera begins this slow push towards them as they're looking at the camera. And it does such a great job of building the suspense. And then the paramedics begin wheeling the body out, and we switch to handheld shots, throwing us in the mix. And we get a lot of POV shots from the victim. It's definitely one of the most intense scenes in the film.
It really bothers me that there's no background noise or filler sounds. We can hear every single step and shuffle as they carefully place the body into the ambulance. It creates this super real moment, and because there's no background music, our attention is forced fully to be on the body and the people surrounding it. The absence of any other sound makes the scene even more intense and impactful. Next is this really awkward bus scene. Stefan and Valerie are on their way back to the hotel, and Stefan confronts Valerie because she seems a bit distanced, but he did just smack her in the head, so I don't blame the girl.
What do you expect?
She claims that Stefan liked looking at the dead body and that he was aroused by it. The dead body had been covered with a red sheet, so that the theme of red comes in and symbolizes forbidden desires. And Stefan does, in fact, seem to find the violence of it arousing, and when Valerie tries to initiate intimacy on the bus, Stefan refuses her. He rejects her straight out. And I think this could be due to his shame of being attracted to the body, and Valerie actually notices and sees him for who he is, or it could just be another power move to control Valerie.
Yeah, I think you're right. Technically speaking, the scene was great. You just have the medium 2-shot with Stefan and Valerie initially. It gets weird when we see these insert shots of Valerie trying to put her hands on Stefan. It's almost as if visually we're being told that Valerie likes that Stefan was turned on by the dead girl.
It's so weird.
But that goes back to the similarities between them and the Countess and Ilona.
Yes.
Which brings us to the next scene. Back at the hotel, we see Ilona coming down the stairs when suddenly she stops. The camera cranes down and we see the Countess knitting in the hotel lounge. Ilona seems afraid initially to approach the Countess. The Countess acknowledges her presence, but Ilona can't say anything. She begins begging the Countess to leave her, or to let her leave, but the Countess won't budge. Then we hear laughter and Stefan and Valerie walk in. The Countess tells Ilona to leave her. It shows that the Countess is more interested in Stefan and Valerie. I think that Ilona had maybe overstayed her welcome with the Countess.
And the knitting is kind of weird. It almost feels like a trap to make Elizabeth seem harmless and almost motherly in a way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it sets the stage for Elizabeth's grand plan to replace Ilona.
And she's not going to replace Ilona and let Ilona leave on her free will, obviously, because she still has use. She's still useful.
Right. Yeah.
So Elizabeth convinces Stefan and Valerie to have drinks with her. And as they head towards their room, Pierre gives them this warning about the Countess. But Stefan shrugs it off and they head to their room.
Yeah, he says the Countess has stayed there 40 years before.
Yeah.
And Stefan's like immediately shrugging it off, like, nope, must be the daughter. It's almost like he knows who she is, but refuses to admit it.
Honestly, Pierre really seems like a real one, like he is trying his best to warn these people, like, this woman is obviously a vampire, but also keeps it a polite and professional manner about it.
Well, I'm sure he doesn't want to get fired or anything. I mean, he's probably got like 5 kids to feed and all that.
So, yeah, also, he's the only hotel staff we ever see. He's holding this place up on his back all alone, doing all the check-in, cooking, and he probably even does the housekeeping.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so in the next scene, the Countess has changed into almost like this blood red nightgown, once again symbolizing her power. Stefan and Valerie have switched, with Stefan dressed in white and Valerie in black, which I think symbolizes that in this scene Stefan is her victim. Then Ilona walks in and the Countess puts her cigarette out almost immediately. And you remember the retired cop from before? Well, he shows up. He begins telling them about how he remembers the Countess from many years before, and he's investigating the murders that have been happening. The Countess is just brushing him off, like the old man doesn't know what he's talking about. And then he starts alluding to the fact that the murders taking place in Bruges are somewhat special. The type of thing you'd only read about in medieval manuscripts, silly tales about ghosts chased away with garlic, vampires shrinking away from crosses. So the policeman leaves, and we see the Countess hand Ilona her drink, and Ilona pours it out in the planter behind the couch. So that should tell you something.
Yeah.
So then she has Stefan go to get her another drink. And then he comes back empty-handed, and the Countess begins recounting her, quote, ancestors' escapades. And then suddenly Stefan begins telling her tales, terrible things like ripping off people's nipples and shoving flaming rods into people's mouths. Valerie begins begging them to stop, but they don't. And then Valerie finally has enough and leaves. I think the Countess was using her powers of seduction on Stefan.
Yes.
It's like he had no control over himself.
So this scene is just overpowering because we see when they're having their conversations before the policeman show up, we see a little bit of a power struggle between Elizabeth and Stefan.
Mm-hmm.
Because Elizabeth is just going on and just being very romantic, very seductive. And Stefan kind of just ignores it. Like he's used to women like flaunting at him and trying to get all the attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he comes back and we see that they share this passion about the ancestor, the original Elizabeth Bathory. And there's lots of like physical touching and just like they're both being hypnotized by the terror. So let's actually talk about Elizabeth's namesake, the real historical figure, Hungarian noblewoman Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth was born in 1560 to Baron George Bathory, the sixth, and then the Baroness Anna Bathory. Throughout her childhood, she suffered from what they called falling sickness, and what we call now is epilepsy. She suffered multiple seizures, and how they treated this was to actually rub blood of someone who wasn't suffering from epilepsy to the lips of the epileptic person.
Yeah, let me just have epilepsy. I'm just going to have epilepsy.
You don't want the blood?
No, I'm good.
Some people have linked this treatment to her future, explaining her cruelty later in life. Now, how the real Elizabeth Bathory became obsessed with blood is unclear. When I was in high school, I actually did a report on vampirism. And when I did research on Elizabeth, there was a story about how she had slapped a servant girl so hard that she bled. And Elizabeth took notice of how the blood seemed to make her skin appear more youthful. And that's how the lore goes. So between 1590 to 1610, Elizabeth was accused of torturing and killing hundreds of girls and women. It's rumored that Elizabeth had started taking peasant girls into her home with the promise of work, only to torture and bleed them to death. Now, once there was a lack of peasant girls, Elizabeth began to send out invitations to more noble and well-off families, promising noble daughters positions within her home, and to also teach them etiquette. And this is where she kind of messes up. Much like how things are handled nowadays, people don't seem to really care when people, like poor people, go missing. But when rich people start missing, people tend to get involved.
Yeah, like in a submarine.
Yeah, like a submarine.
Oof.
The investigation started in 1602 as rumors of the atrocities began to spread. By 1611, there were over 300 witness statements against the Countess. 4 of her servants were accused of torturing and killing hundreds of women. All 4 were put on trial and convicted, whereas Bathory, being a countess, she was imprisoned inside her room until she died in 1614. The stories of Bathory became part of national folklore, describing her as a vampire. Tales of her bloody rituals and even bathing in the blood of virgins, were recorded years after her death. Several historians now describe the trial of Elizabeth as a witch hunt. And in 2018, an article even stated that the prosecution of Bathory were speculations to destroy her family's influence in the region. And Bathory's family had been considered a threat to the political interest of other noble families, including the Habsburg Empire.
Fake news. It's fake news. So now, upstairs, Valerie is getting ready to take a bath, and we see her walk through the bathroom door, and as soon as the water starts running, we dolly forward, making the slow push into the dressing room, and then we see a shadow on the balcony door. And it seems like someone's trying to make a late night visit. So we cut to a shot of a hand on the door from the outside trying to open it. Suddenly, Valerie comes into view. She walks over to investigate the door and pulls the door open. And she's surprised to see Ilona standing on the balcony naked trying to get in. Valerie screams, alerting Stefan, who's still downstairs with the Countess. Stefan, the Countess, and Pierre bolt upstairs to find Valerie on the bed crying. The Countess goes to see if Ilona heard anything and finds Ilona hunched over the toilet. She scolds Ilona for not being able to wait, and then once she returns to Stefan and Valerie, Valerie pleads with her to leave them alone. Stefan doesn't share that same feeling and tells the Countess that he's sorry and says that they will see each other tomorrow.
There's also this thing where I almost feel like Ilona was discovered on purpose because she had amount of time to actually get back into her own room because their windows are on the same balcony. But instead of hiding, she literally pops up at Valerie. And Valerie doesn't even mention that it is Ilona. Like, she doesn't even recognize her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like maybe Ilona did it purposefully to
warn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And also maybe to drive her away because of her jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Ilona says she wants freedom, that doesn't necessarily mean she really wants it.
Right.
So we witness how Elizabeth continues to try to control the situation. She appears to be trying to help Valerie calm down, offering pills and whatever help she can offer. Even after Valerie tells her to leave, the Countess only leaves after the request of Stefan. This leads into one of the weirdest scenes in the movie. Once Valerie seems to be calm, and as they get ready for bed, Stefan finally tells her he will call his mother in the morning. They begin to have sex, and Stefan is in the red robe once again. It begins normal enough and seems very passionate and gentle in a way. Then we see Stefan's face change. And Stefan lashes out towards Valerie, grabbing her by her head and pushing her away and then onto one side of the bed. He then quickly rolls away from her and curls up like in a fetal position and grabs at his head.
Right. And then the camera cuts violently to the sheer curtains on the balcony door. We push into them and fade into the Countess and Ilona standing there watching. It's very creepy. Very creepy.
I don't understand. It's one of those things in this movie where it's just almost like we don't have enough information. And we're going to see that a little bit more through the rest of the movie. But Stefan's reaction here is just... I don't know if it's because Valerie was the one again to try to initiate the intimacy, and he doesn't want to unless he's initiating it. So I don't know if it's another tactic to control and withdraw from her.
Yeah, I don't know. My idea is that in this scene, the reason he acts the way he does is because the Countess is using her powers or whatever. Because it's kind of the same way as when they were down in the lounge still, and she's, using her powers of seduction or whatever to make Stefan say all that stuff. But she's using her powers to make Stefan drive Valerie away.
Yeah.
And
that could be it, yeah.
Pushing Valerie into the Countess's arms.
It also could be a display of the Countess's jealousy towards Stefan and how he can be intimate with Valerie and she can't yet.
Another note is that earlier in the movie, the Countess referred to her ancestor as the Scarlet Countess, which could be considered to be like a Black Widow sort of thing, and she's making Stefan push Valerie into her web, essentially. So
the next morning, Stefan is true to his word, and he calls his mother. This is another one of the most confusing moments in the movie. Instead of speaking to a woman, he speaks to a man. It's very unclear about the relationship between Stefan and mother, but I suspect that this is Stefan's patron or a lover of his. After this phone call, a storm begins outside, and we see these images of waves crashing and lightning. Inside the room, Stefan becomes enraged, and we see him abuse Valerie. There is definitely a connection between the violence outside and the domestic abuse inside the hotel room.
Absolutely. I think that the connection is a metaphor for the rage built up inside Stefan. I'm not sure if it stems from his mother character or his interactions with the Countess. I think it does a great job of conveying that message, though.
We never see, and there's also never another mention about mother.
I know, which is odd considering that in the first act, that's all Stefan and Valerie could talk about.
And it really, when we see Mother, who is credited, the character is actually called Mother in the script. He is at this grand manor, and then he's also in this atrium style, like lounging, and the butler brings him the phone and stuff, and he is just, there's a lot of, the phone call is strange. Like, there's not really any, like, direct conversation about the situation. It's all very cryptid, I would say.
I feel like Mother came across very James Bond villain-ish.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and I really don't know why. I still have no clue.
So, after this day of abuse, and after the weather clears, Valerie tries to flee Stefan, but is followed by Elizabeth, who stops her from getting on a train. Elizabeth begins to talk in circles and distracts Valerie from her goal. Even though Elizabeth has no knowledge of what happened between Valerie and Stefan, she simply says it cannot be that serious. And that pisses me off so much. It really does. Meanwhile, Ilona has been sent to Stefan as a distraction by the Countess. She's cryptid with Stefan, and he finds this alluring, and they have an affair. Stefan, honestly, is just grade A husband material, let me tell you.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yep.
I can't possibly see why Valerie would want to leave him. So now the Countess has Valerie down at the beach, and she's basically trying to get Valerie to see how bad of a man he is. She's slowly turning Valerie to be her follower. One of my favorite shots is in this scene. The Countess and Valerie are walking up to what seems to be a parlor, and as they approach, they're walking up to the facade, and the shadows from the pillars and the moonlight create these great leading lines to Valerie and the Countess.
Yeah. It's very striking, very visibly visible. Visually, yes, striking. So back in the hotel room, Ilona and Stefan continue their affair. There's a lot of slow and gentle moves in this scene, and it's kind of shocking how it is, because it's totally different compared to his moments with Valerie, where they're very like rough and passionate and starving in a way. But Ilona seems to be more in control here. Even in one shot, Stefan reaches up to Ilona and she places her arms around herself before he can even touch her. There's also this strange position they're in. Ilona lays across Stefan's body with her head at his feet. And it really gives me a sensation of disconnection, and that Ilona really doesn't want to be a part of the experience.
Meanwhile, Valerie and the Countess are still in the parlor, and the Countess tells Valerie she's going to read her palm. She takes Valerie's glove off and begins tracing the lines in her palm. She tells Valerie that one of the lines is Stefan, and he's going away, far away. The Countess kisses Valerie's hand and tells her that soon she will love the Countess as the Countess loves her. Valerie stands and tells the Countess that she despises her and leaves. Valerie walks down the corridor and freezes. She sees the Countess standing before her. The Countess takes her by the arm and explains to Valerie that Stefan wants to turn her into what every man wants to turn their wives into: slaves, things, objects for pleasure. She takes Valerie back to the hotel, telling her that she'll show her what men are like.
So there's a lot going on in this scene. One of the things I mostly want to point out is that she mentions that every man wants to turn their wives into slave things and objects, where we know for a fact that Elizabeth is wanting to turn Valerie into something she can possess. Mm-hmm. So it's...
Yeah, but that goes back to that demagogue thing you were talking about earlier.
Yes, exactly.
So, she's just using Valerie's fear against her.
She's so good at it.
Yeah.
This is obviously something she's been doing for decades and centuries, if not. So Ilona watches after their affair and after the very strange sex they've had. Ilona watches intently at Stefan as Stefan is showering, and he invites her to shower with him. She begins to freak out as he grabs her and carries her towards the shower. Now, before, the retired policeman had mentioned that vampires fear running water. This is a bit of vampire trivia, that if a vampire is immersed in running water, they become helpless and can be destroyed. We watch as Ilona starts to freak the fuck out, and Stefan seems to think this is some sort of game, because he continues to hold and kiss her as she's like screaming and wiggling and trying to get away. She flails away from him and falls across the bathroom, and we have this shot of her hand just sliding along the counter, and she grips the straight razor in her hand. And Stefan slips from the shower and falls onto Ilona, and her hand falls behind her back, and she's impaled onto the razor and dies. Now, I'm not sure if this would have worked if she had been dry, or if the actual running water made her defenseless, and that's how she died.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. The only thing that that really like shot out at me about this scene was how like cringy it felt.
It was a little, yeah.
The whole like her dragging her hand along the shelf, like almost like she's trying to find the razor, you know, like it just felt very staged and not natural. So
yes, definitely. Right as Ilona dies, just right on cue, Valerie and the Countess appear, and they have seen what he has done. And instead of being worried about Ilona, Valerie screams out at Stefan, and yeah, it's Stefan becomes pretty much useless at this point. And then we have the kiss. The Countess is with Valerie as they enter the room, and Valerie says, "I'll go get someone," or starts to go get someone, and the Countess grabs her and says, "Are you out of your mind?" And then this dreamy, hazy kind of effect happens in the scene. And we see the Countess's lips slowly move closer to Valerie. Although, obviously, this was, 1971. We don't get to see the actual kiss. It's blocked. But as she pulls away, we get to see a little bit of blood on Valerie's lips.
Yeah, almost as if to signify that the transfer is complete.
Yeah, is as soon as Ilona was gone.
Dude,
Elizabeth was like, "Oh, I gotta replace this girl."
It's like, I know she undead, but the body ain't even cold yet.
No,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, so after this, Stefan just becomes useless. He's sitting on the edge of the bed as the Countess and Valerie clean up and wrap up Ilona's body.
You said Stefan. Is it Stefan? It's Stefan, isn't it?
Is it Stefan?
I'm pretty sure it's Stefan.
Stefan.
It doesn't matter. It really does not matter.
That's his name.
While he sits there, we can see how disgusted Elizabeth is as she and Valerie clean up his mess. It's almost like a mother scolding like her son. It's very pathetic.
Yeah. So now they're driving with Stefan and Valerie in the back. Stefan tries to put his hand on Valerie, but she pulls away. The Countess sees this and kind of smirks. And then they pass the retired policeman on the side of the road, and he begins following them on his bike. A bicycle.
He's really in pursuit on a bicycle.
He's going to give pursuit on a bicycle.
He's really going to catch up to
He's going to do it. So finally, they make it to the beach, and Stefan drags Ilona's body down the dunes.
Stefan can't even really get rid of the body correctly, and Elizabeth ends up kicking Ilona's body down the hill, down into the beach. And also, they have all this ocean around them, and they decide to bury the body.
I don't know. It's a movie, Anyway, the Countess shows up wearing this cape. How very vampire of her to do that. So now, with the Countess's help, Stefan begins digging a hole to bury Ilona with his hands at the beach. Valerie begins wandering up the beach, and the Countess follows. So Valerie's staring at the water with the Countess behind her. The Countess literally spreads her cape like a bat.
Yes.
I think it's pretty obvious now that she's a vampire, if anyone didn't know. So the Countess and Valerie show back up, and Stefan has completely dug this hole already. It's a big ass hole.
Yeah, it is.
It's pretty big.
It's a body-sized hole.
Yeah. So then they don't even wait for Stefan to get out of the hole. They just throw Ilona's body in on top of him and begin filling in the hole. And then Valerie, in a moment of sympathy, pulls him out you know, and then the Countess is like, no, get away from me. So she pulls her away, and then the Countess looks over and sees the policeman standing on the hill nearby. So they hurry and fill in the hole the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, Stefan's just sitting there.
Yeah.
You know, so the Countess, so they got the hole filled in, and the Countess is like, I'm going to cover up our tracks. So she drags her cape across the dirt, which literally does nothing.
No, nothing at all. The lack of concern about Stefan being in the hole with Ilona's body really foreshadows his future.
Yeah, it does.
So as they make their way back after burying Ilona's body, the sun is coming up quickly, and Elizabeth is like, yeah, we have to get out of here. So they're running from the sun, and Elizabeth sees the retired policeman as she's driving, and she takes the opportunity, and Elizabeth runs the man over, bike and all, and we see him roll away and crash into the ground, and that is the last time we actually see him.
Yeah, me personally, I highly doubt the man died from that.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I'm just saying, I've crashed a lot of bikes.
Okay. They arrive back to the hotel, and Pierre is already up and opening the hotel, and Elizabeth naturally takes control, and they make their way back to their rooms. And instead of following her husband, Valerie enters Elizabeth's room. Like, just doesn't say anything. She kind of gives Stefan a look, but she just totally ignores her.
Well, Stefan kind of grabs her by the hand, and then the Countess, like, breaks them up, you know.
Next, we see Valerie naked on the bed with Elizabeth leaning over her. And I think this implies that Elizabeth is biting her or exchanging more blood.
Yeah, I think it's partially, like, you know, making sure that transfer is complete sort of thing.
Because next time we really see Valerie, she's kind of in a trance.
Yeah. So we see Stefan writhing and suddenly jolting awake in the next scene. And then we cut to the Countess's room where the Countess is helping Valerie get dressed. And I'd like to point out that earlier in the film, there's a shot of the Countess looking into her compact.
Oh, yeah.
And you only see, like, a reflection of her fingers.
Hand.
Yeah, but not her. And here in this scene, you see all of her. So I'm not sure if that was an error or what, being that she's a vampire. So at this point, Valerie is fully turned, and the Countess sends her to Stefan's room. And here, Stefan is seemingly trying to pack, but the Countess is requesting his presence. He is insisting that they leave, but Valerie refuses. So it kind of seems that Valerie is completely brainwashed into thinking that the Countess could do no wrong. She tells Stefan that when the Countess is near, she becomes someone else. And just then, the Countess comes in through the balcony door, and the Countess insists that they have dinner with her, but Stefan keeps refusing her advances.
Can we talk about the dress?
The sequin dress.
Oh my God.
Glitz and glam.
She walks in this silver sequin dress. It's like a maxi dress with like a high neck collar, and just it's very form fitting, and it's so gorgeous.
Like, think Eurovision.
It's yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these next few scenes just seem to be a pissing contest between Elizabeth and Stefan, each trying to control Valerie in some way. They play this little cat and mouse game, a little back and forth, and Stefan is trying to intimidate the Countess by just kind of staring her down. And she mentions where she's been in the past few weeks and months, and he links her to her stay in Bruges, and to the murders. And then Stefan goes to Valerie, and she refuses him yet again. The Countess then tells her to go to her husband and kiss him. This obviously is a display of her control over Valerie to show Stefan that she is the one actually in control of the whole situation. This enrages Stefan, and he stakes her claim on Valerie claiming to be a man and that he is his. It's very objectifying.
Yeah, but Valerie continues to refuse him and say he can only destroy.
Yeah.
And this angers him more, so a struggle ensues. Stefan slaps Valerie around and knocks the Countess away. And then the Countess somehow knocks a dining cart over, which it's almost like he knocked her clear across the room, and then on her way back, she knocked the cart over. I don't know either. So she then grabs a crystal bowl and tries to cover Stefan's face with it. And he struggles, so Valerie begins to help the Countess, and then the bowl breaks. And then magically, Stefan manages to cut both wrists on the bowl. So then the Countess and Valerie begin draining Stefan of his blood.
I'm not saying that she purposely took a longer amount to go and get to Valerie when Stefan's like on top of her and it's like slapping her around and stuff. But it does seem like she's delayed and like a little, I don't know, careful about making her way back over to them. And then she purposely pushes this dinner cart and everything goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm happy about Stefan dying. No, wait, I actually am a little satisfied that he died. I'm fine with it, honestly.
I mean, it's okay. I think you can be happy about that.
So, now they have to dump Stefan's body. Unlike the actual burial of Ilona's, Stefan gets a different treatment where his remains are just kind of thrown into this dirty trash water in a ditch somewhere. Like, it's just... You see a shot of this water filled with like trash and stuff, and then you see the body like wrapped in like a trash bag or something.
Yeah, it is pretty gross.
Yeah,
it's pretty gross.
Now they have decided to move on and not go back to the hotel. Elizabeth and Valerie are speeding away down these winding roads, and the road is surrounded by these deep forests, and it's really dark still. And Elizabeth is demanding that Valerie drive faster and is promising eternal life. And then they're caught by the sunlight suddenly and they crash. Elizabeth's body is actually like flown through the windshield and is impaled by this fallen tree branch. The car explodes with Valerie inside. And then the body of Elizabeth catches fire and burns to a crisp pretty quickly.
Yep, and then we see a time jump of a few months later. A violinist is playing for this couple all dressed in white, and then a figure walks up from behind, clad in a cape. Valerie, having survived the accident, has seemingly taken up the mantle as the Countess. She even has the Countess's voice. She takes the couple by the hand and sets off into the night. The violinist follows them for a while, until Valerie tells him to fuck off.
Yeah, it's really awkward because we have this shot down this long pathway with a gate, and it's completely pretty much silent other than the violin playing, and they're getting farther and farther and farther away until they're like tiny, and then you see Valerie turn, talk to this guy, and he completely stops and just stands there. And then she rushes back to the couple.
It's almost like, hey man, you missed your cue. Like you were supposed to stop.
You were supposed to stop way back there, so you should.
So, yeah, that was great.
So that was Daughters of Darkness. What did you think?
As far as films go, I thought that it was okay. Like the story was kind of sporadic at times. The cinematography overall, I thought was pretty good. There were some shots that were kind of jarring, like the car approach where there's like 3 different shots. There's a lot of really good lighting. The lighting always felt motivated. I didn't notice anything that felt off. The overall production value felt good. I mean, for it being early 1970s, it was the special effects was about as good as you're going to see during that time period. So, I would say overall, I would probably give this movie like a 6.5 out of 10.
Since watching it a second time and actually doing all this research and knowing so much lore about it, I think I was very harsh when I first judged it and gave it a 4.5. But now watching it and knowing all the information I also would probably give it a 6.5. The reason being it had such a lower score for me personally is because of all the dead ends or the questions that we have that just whose mother?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What? That was mainly the biggest issue is whose mother?
Who is mother? What was the point of the policeman?
Yeah.
Other than to get ran off the road on a bicycle. Pierre, he's holding up the fort, of the hotel.
Poor Pierre.
It's just the film itself was very just all over the place, so.
But all in all, I do see the reason it has such a cult following.
Oh, yeah.
The reason there were so many articles and so many mentions of this movie within the Wikipedia, any articles about Delphine and a few more from the other people that were in it and the other actors. So I can completely understand why it has that cult following.
Yeah. Yeah.
It definitely is a movie that is very seductive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of sexual themes.
Yes.
A lot of nudity.
And abuse and control.
And abuse and control.
It was a lot.
So if any of those things are triggering, we would not recommend watching.
True. Yes. But thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Sorry.
This being our first episode, we thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to follow us at our socials at Made Him Watch. And you can listen to this podcast everywhere that podcasts are heard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So thank you. And this is Troy and Dani signing out.
Bye.